I suppose the essence of the book is that my father was always a fascinating figure to me. He was, there was something about him I always liked and always admired, but I didn't exactly know what that was or why it was. Growing up, he had said very little about the prison camps. To me at least, I'd heard very little about them. And then between the ages of 70 and 90, he wrote these 4 fragments that reflected on the experience.
I would say for me, for all the old prisoners of war, what they went through is the defining thing in their life. Absolutely defining thing in their life, yeah.
Once Dad agreed to doing it, what you had was 4 pieces. And then the question became, what narrative? What could I say? And that pretty quickly became the question of, what is it to be the son of such a man?
In the early days at Hintock, people were sick with this and that, but no one died. And I remember Charlie saying, it takes a lot to kill a man, yeah. Which would have come back and haunt him or haunt all of us, really, because it didn't take much in the finish.
It was a matter of handling it in a way that was consistent with his sensibility about it. And that meant absolutely no sensationalising, none. And no blurring of knowledge, of what was known. He doesn't pay weight to exaggeration. He's got an amazingly good memory. And he remembers what is. And he had this amazing experience, and he's a great witness to that experience.
I can't recall it emotionally, but I can recall it factually. And I do remember that the worst thing was the hopelessness, the feeling of hopelessness that comes upon you. You know that if you weaken, if you go down, you're out. Yeah, you're finished. You've got to keep going.
Those people were taken to the edge of total breakdown in human decency and standards, but they preserved certain standards. And that's what makes it so interesting. They preserved certain standards to do with caring for one another. How did they do it? Why did they do it?
It was a collective spirit, mateship. Yeah. If it hadn't have been for that, I think most of us have gone down the drain.
That's something which seems to be Australian about the story, because there are other Allied troops who didn't survive as well as these blokes did. And it's also obviously a story about leadership. I mean, they had a great leader.
Hintock Mountain Camp to me was where Weary really grew as a giant. And really, to serve under him was a great privilege.
Think of Dunlop, Colonel Dunlop, which I mightn't do today or tomorrow or the next day, and then he'll come back to me. It quite moves me to think of him. Yeah. He was so hard and brave, and yet he was so kind and gentle.
I've designed this book in such a way that by the time the people get to the last story, then the readers should have some idea of what it meant to be on the Burma Railway, and then go on the ride with this story, which I think in one sense is Dad's best bit of writing, because I think it asks in a fictional way that most serious of questions, morally serious of questions. If you and I are in a situation where my chances of surviving go up as yours go down, what is it that I owe you? And I think he gives a really finely judged answer to that question.
The prison camp, you had that session before you died when you were sick, when you were physically sick, and when you were homesick. You just wanted not just your home, but you wanted to be back in your country again where things were normal.
The major interaction between us was that he trusted me He never asked once to see what I was doing. He never sought once to control in any way what I was writing. And if I paid him back for that, it was by insisting that when his writing was published, it was published exactly as he wrote it. Word perfect, punctuation point perfect. Because I think there is something in the rhythm of his words that is 92 years old. He predates not only television, he predates wireless, he predates electricity. His consciousness comes from another time, and I wanted that consciousness to come across in the book.
All those fellows, so young and vital at the time, as the poet said, they were young, strong of limb, sturdy and aglow. You look at it, you go along, there are faces there you haven't thought of for years. Fellows come back to you, most of them now long dead. Many of them, of course, didn't return from the war, and they've dropped off one by one since, until, as I say, there's only a dozen of them left now.
There are certain extraordinary characteristics about the 5 men I've known, either well or reasonably well. That's Dad, Weary, Blue, Tom and Ray Parker. Certainly in the case of all them, there is an Eastern aspect to their thinking. That I find that very interesting. They have that Eastern way of detaching. They have that Eastern belief that the thing which really matters, when everything else is cut away, the thing that really matters is compassion.
One day, the Dunlop was still up on the line somewhere, and he got down on the train that was bringing back the Japanese prisoners, and there's one there that he'd had his leg blown off or amputated or something. It was all gangrenous, and he befriended him, and he gave him medical assistance, and he said, because in the Buddhist religion all men who suffer are equal.
To me, what the line has going for it is authenticity. It is one man's honest story. The great gift he's given me is that his belief that the truth is ultimately preferable to any illusion, even a comforting illusion. That's my father's belief. That's why I describe him in the book as being like a hard old monk. He wasn't physically hard, but it was just that his life had led him to see through lots of illusions.
Made me realise again the truth of that old quotation. There's so much good in the worst of us, and so much bad in the best of us, that it ill behoves any of us to speak ill of the rest of us. Yeah, it made me very tolerant. Yeah. And very understanding.
It's a wonderful thing when you love your father, who's a very old man, to know that you were able to give him something that, even if he couldn't say, now means a lot to him. And it was a wonderful thing to be able to tell someone who still recites verbatim large tracts of things he learnt at school, that his book was now being taught at school. So there was a possibility that in 70 years' time, someone somewhere will be telling their grandson something about the line. They were just wonderful, wonderful things that I'll cherish till the day I die.